The sun over Xanthari Prime was artificial, embedded in the dome of the Academy's upper atmosphere complex, yet it cast a golden haze over the parade grounds with convincing warmth. The cadets stood in perfect formation, 1,000 bodies, multiple species, united by discipline, uniform, and the promise of galactic peace through shared strength. Among them stood the smallest contingent, 6 human cadets in navy black training suits, contrasting against the silvered, patterned armor of their alien counterparts. The others towered over them, one-eyed Krelvians, carapaced Nithar, serpent-bodied Suvathi, and the leathern-winged Yadari. Yet the humans stood straight, unmoving, faces half-lit by the synthetic sunrise, eyes forward. Major Raul Jacques, a 4-armed instructor with a voice like cracking stone, stepped onto the hovering command dais. His deep violet skin glinted as his command aura shimmered around him, an optical shield that emphasized authority and emitted real-time tactical overlays. "Today marks your final simulation," he announced, his mandibles clicking at the edges of his mouth. "You will engage in the Veyron Descent Protocol, a planetary defense scenario based on an actual invasion campaign recorded 92 cycles ago." His 4 arms rose with theatrical precision as the holographic landscape spun behind him. A detailed virtual planet rotating slowly in mid-air. Mountain ranges, cityscapes, energy domes, river canyons, and sprawling forests were etched with perfect detail. This simulation had been crafted by both military tacticians and socio-psychological specialists, designed not just to test coordination, but to provoke chaos and adaptation. The defending team will comprise mixed-species cadets stationed in the central core of Veyron 4. You are tasked with surviving and repelling a hostile force. Laughter, subtle but unmistakable, echoed across the rows as the assignment rosters materialized in front of each cadet's neural visor. The human squad had been placed among the defenders. It was no secret that the instructors viewed them as the wild cards, emotionally unstable, unpredictable, undisciplined, and still not entirely trusted by the Galactic Consortium. Most of the aliens saw the humans as outliers, useful in theory, but too new to be strategically reliable. Among the human cadets stood Eli Vance, a lean young man with short-cropped hair and an absent-minded gaze that hid a mind constantly calculating. Beside him, Tala Wen adjusted her shoulder band slightly, checking the sync of her haptic feedback system. She didn't smile, but her lips twitched as she noticed the attacking roster, led by a full unit of veteran alien soldiers meant to simulate an elite threat. The implication was clear: the defense squad was meant to fail. The real objective was to analyze response patterns under pressure. Captain Idrin, a Telvaxian with metallic silver skin and slitted yellow eyes, landed softly near the dais. He was to lead the attacking simulation. He had spent 3 decades training soldiers across systems. Today, he wore a half-smile as he surveyed the defenders. His gaze lingered on the humans for a second too long. He turned to Raul Jacques and muttered, "I assume we're meant to hold back." Jacques' mandibles flared in what passed for a grin. "Just enough to make them sweat. Let them show what they've learned." As cadets boarded their assigned transports to be deployed into the simulation chamber, Eli leaned toward Tala and whispered, "They expect a clean sweep." She nodded once. "Then let's give them something dirty." The simulation world wasn't just code. It was built, rendered in ultra-physical layers, with environmental physics modeled on battle-hardened worlds. When the human squad was dropped into their assigned zone, a dense urban corridor mimicking the capital city of Veyron, they instantly took note of the placements. The rest of the defending team scattered toward designated bunkers and defense points, following pre-programmed strategy guides, but the humans hesitated. Eli looked around. "We're not going to those bunkers." Jason McNeil, the team's heavy gunner, frowned. "But that's the defense plan." "It's their plan," Eli replied. "It's what the attackers were trained to expect. Every move scripted. Let them play chess. We'll play something else." He pulled a thin cable from his gear, attaching it to the surveillance hub of the nearest building. "We vanish. Total disruption. We control the narrative." Tala had already climbed halfway up the wall, dismantling a secondary power node to reroute the heat signals. The rest followed silently. Within minutes, the 6 humans disappeared from all sensor data, leaving only decoys and environmental static. Elsewhere, the alien commanders prepared to execute the assault phase. Idrin tapped a panel with casual precision. Commence breach. Simulated dropships roared into the cityscape, shimmering with false fire and sonic shockwaves. Alien troops moved with tight, rehearsed formation, meticulous, by the book. But what they encountered were flickers, echoes, and empty fortifications. No defenders, no return fire. Idrin frowned. Telemetry corrupted? His second-in-command, a rigid Krelvian named Petrok, checked twice. No, sir. The humans aren't where they should be. It was the beginning of unease, and back in the control chamber, Raljok narrowed his eyes at the console feed. Where are the humans? He muttered aloud. No one answered. The simulated city breathed with a false life. Holographic birds scattered as the alien attack force descended, and artificial wind stirred abandoned banners on lampposts. The streets were rendered with military-grade precision. Burn marks on walls, digital graffiti coded for realism, even broken glass that crunched under boots with uncanny accuracy. To anyone immersed in the scenario, it felt real. It was real enough to fool the senses, and to make one mistake that could result in a bruised rib or fractured pride. Captain Idrin moved with cool precision as he led the first phalanx of attackers through a collapsed marketplace. His neural display mapped the area flawlessly. He expected minor resistance, maybe one or two automated countermeasures left behind by the defenders. His instincts, however, were agitated. Something was off. The city was too quiet. He held up one hand, signaling for a halt. "Thermal scan," he ordered. The response came from Lieutenant Herrick, a flame-skinned Waidari with naturally heat-sensitive eyes. No motion. Scattered heat sources. Bunkers ahead, cold. No humanoid signatures. Idrin narrowed his gaze. Bunkers should be hot with cadets. Unless they're empty, a burst of static rattled his comlink. Then a hiss. Then silence. He tapped his earpiece twice. "Command, status report." No answer. Not even system acknowledgement. He turned sharply to Pterok. "We've lost link to the simulation monitors." Terok blinked his 4 eyelids in confusion. "That's impossible." Before he could respond, an explosion rocked the left flank. It wasn't a plasma detonation. No bright hue, no scorch. It was raw, mechanical, crude. A street kiosk had blown apart, flinging shards of jagged rebar laced with magnetic shrapnel. 3 attackers went down instantly, their armor systems scrambling. 2 more lost balance, limbs twitching from EMP residue. "Snipers!" someone yelled. "No!" Idrin growled. That was a trap, a human one. He darted behind cover, then activated the tactical overlay, expecting enemy positioning, triangulation, heat trails. Nothing. The map was useless. Instead, the system displayed overlapping fields of interference, every known signal corrupted by what appeared to be randomized waveforms. Herruck hissed from behind a collapsed food cart. "Sir, these aren't static errors. Someone's feeding us misinformation. Real time." Idrin's blood went cold. The next strike came before the first squad could recover. A fog rolled down from the rooftops, thick, dense, artificially chilled. At first, Idrin believed it to be a simulated environmental shift, but when the gas began triggering false biological threat warnings, he realized it was human-made. Not lethal, confusing, blinding. Tactical disorientation at its purest form. Amid the fog, shapes darted, fast, silent. One form, human-sized, slid down a drain pipe and vaulted over an armored vehicle, slapping a sticky beacon onto its hull. A second later, the beacon popped with a shriek loud enough to disable auditory sensors. 2 soldiers collapsed in pain. Another discharged his weapon in panic, hitting a holographic wall which shattered into code and reformed seconds later. Captain Idrin fought his way back to the center of his squad, furious but now fully alert. "Regroup! Regroup at Sector D7. Fall back to open ground." The retreat was ragged. What should have been a textbook breach had turned into a retreat within minutes. Idrin had seen human tactics before. Chaotic, yes, but rarely this coordinated. This was surgical, deliberate, not improvisation, planning. Elsewhere in the city, Eli crouched beneath the remains of a train station, watching his tablet. The humans had created their own network by physically rerouting the simulator's backup cables and injecting their own signal dampeners. He watched the alien movements from hacked cameras, overlaid with thermal maps they themselves distorted using vented steam from ruptured water mains. East flank retreating, he murmured. Tala crouched beside him, wiping grit from her cheek. We go loud or quiet? Loud enough to spook them, quiet enough not to let command shut us down. She smirked and pulled the trigger on her hand-wired interference burst. Across the city, every alien helmet lit up with artificial friend or foe confusion. Lines turned red, then blue, then blank. Each soldier now saw everyone else as a potential enemy. Panic swept through the comms. Jason, stationed inside a simulated power substation, slammed the emergency pressure valve. The pipe burst upward like a geyser. The street cracked. 3 soldiers above stumbled, then one fell through the weakened floor entirely. By the time Idrin regrouped with a dozen surviving soldiers, his map displayed only chaos. No clear lines, no objectives. He barked into his comm again. Command, request override. End simulation, respond. Still nothing. Then the voice came, not from the command center, but from a rooftop speaker. It was Eli. This is Unit 12 Delta, he said calmly. Simulation rules remain intact. No lethal force deployed, no permanent harm inflicted. We're still within protocol. You're just losing. Idrin stared upward, expression unreadable. Where are you? I'm everywhere you expected us not to be. Then the connection died. Perrock clutched his weapon, eyes scanning wildly. We underestimated them. Idrin clenched his jaw. We didn't underestimate. We misdefined. With a deep breath, he ordered a full squad recall and emergency protocol assessment. We treat this like a live op now. No assumptions, no mercy, but deep inside something curdled. If 6 humans could do this in a controlled environment, what could an army do when it no longer played by galactic rules? Captain Idrin moved along the edge of a ruined transport terminal, his boots crunching softly against the debris-coated platform. His pulse beat heavily in his throat, not from exhaustion, but from the humiliating churn of uncertainty. Everything was collapsing into formlessness. Protocols weren't working. Formations weren't holding. Even the simulation AI, the polished product of centuries of wargame refinement, was beginning to stutter and mislabel threats. None of it made sense. He tapped a pulse scan into the nearest wall terminal, trying to find any human heat signatures. The display flickered erratically. For a brief second, an image appeared. A smirking male face, human, blinking mockingly before dissolving into pixelated noise. Idrin smashed his fist into the panel. The screen cracked. Above him, something scraped lightly. He turned sharply, raising his blaster. But it was only steam, a pipe shifting from pressure loss. He lowered the weapon, exhaling slowly. It wasn't the humans' weapons that unnerved him. It was the way they refused to act like soldiers. There was no rhythm to their movements, no clear doctrine. They scattered like wind, regrouped like shadow, struck like instinct. It was an animal intelligence, refined through adaptation, not tradition. Elsewhere, Tala crouched beneath the skeleton of a collapsed tower, tuning a vibration-triggered emitter. Her fingers were cut from dragging metal plates across a floor to create false footfalls. The blood only made her grip firmer. She worked fast, unspeaking, while Eli kept watch near the edge of the rubble pile, his eyes fixed on a descending alien squad above. He counted silently, 6 pairs of armored boots. All moving by the book, standard wedge pattern. He didn't wait for them to step into formation, He triggered the emitter. Above, the illusion of a human sprinting left flickered into view and drew fire. The squad captain, a Krelvian sergeant with dull red skin, turned to pursue the image. He took 3 steps forward and plunged into the pit beneath him. It wasn't a trap door. It was a natural weakness in the simulation's load geometry, widened manually by Tala using reinforced cabling and the blunt end of a pulse drill. The 3-meter fall wouldn't kill the alien, but it would hurt. Eli nodded once. Displace. Time to shift. They didn't stay to watch the aftermath. Across the cityscape, similar patterns unfolded. Jason rerouted a drone squadron mid-flight using falsified command pings, causing the mechanical sentries to hover confusedly above a vacant block. In another quarter, Diana Keller, the smallest of the human cadets, used a signal booster wired through an emergency siren array to simulate a full-scale retreat by the defenders. Entire alien units adjusted course to chase phantoms. In the control room, far above the simulation dome, Raljak stood rigid, arms behind his back. His gaze tracked the data flows on the multi-tiered screens. What he saw no longer resembled a simulation. It was entropy, sharpened into strategy. "Disable their override privileges," he ordered one technician. "I want to know if they tampered with the neural command layer." "They didn't," the technician replied. "The core simulation is untouched. They're working inside the system. They're just ignoring the rules." Raljak nodded once, then folded his second pair of arms across his chest. "Then, the rules are no longer useful." Back on the simulated battlefield, Captain Idrin ordered a full unit recalibration. Alien soldiers dug into defensive positions, not to advance, but to contain. "We switch from pursuit to control," he barked. "If we don't move, we don't trigger their traps. We hold the center and wait for them to come to us." It was logical, but the logic was built for symmetric war. The humans didn't come. Instead, small things began to fail. A soldier's oxygen sensor began flooding his mask with faulty readings, triggered by a proximity jammer Eli had planted inside a trash container. A Krelvian scout turned a corner and found a child's drawing on a wall. A simulation artifact meant for scenery. Only this one had been defaced. A human stick figure holding a flag, smiling, beneath alien silhouettes crossed out in red. It wasn't graffiti, it was a message. The humans weren't reacting, they were writing their own script now. The tipping point came when Idrin attempted to send a recon drone to scout the west corridor, where signal silence had lasted too long. The drone activated, lifted, moved 2 meters forward, and then dropped dead mid-air. No explosion, no signal cut, just failure. He tore off his helmet, eyes wild. "What is going on?" A voice crackled from a hidden speaker embedded somewhere in the wall. "They told us this was just a game," said Jason's voice. "But it smells like war. And if it smells like war, humans don't play. We improvise." The squad fell silent. Perek stepped closer. "They're taunting us now." Idrin didn't answer immediately. He stared upward, listening to the city breathing through the simulation's filtered audio. Somewhere out there, 6 cadets had reduced a 200-soldier offensive into paralysis, not by strength, by rewriting the terms of engagement. "They're not taunting us," he muttered finally. "They're teaching us something. I just don't know what yet." One of the younger soldiers, a Suvati named Karin, approached. "Sir, morale is breaking. I suggest requesting simulation termination." Idrin's jaw tightened. "No. We end this the way it started, in the field. Orders remain." Even as he spoke, another message blinked onto his HUD, a motion-detected feed showing a toy ball rolling gently down a staircase in one of the vacant towers. It was a distraction. He didn't fall for it, but 5 of his troops did. That's when he understood. The humans didn't need to win by elimination. They could win by fatigue, by erosion, by suggestion. He closed his eyes for 1 second longer than he should have, and in that second another explosion rattled the simulation grid. It wasn't lethal, but it was perfectly timed. A sharp rhythmic alarm pulsed through the simulated city's core. The low-frequency vibration made windows tremble and filled the air with a tension that felt far too visceral for a training environment. Captain Idrin stood at the edge of a collapsed overpass, overlooking what had once been the simulation's command hub for attackers. Now it looked like a failed excavation site, smoke rising, metal warped, half of the holographic skyline flickering erratically in the aftermath of the most recent disruption. He gritted his teeth as a squad medic patched up one of the fallen soldiers, an insectoid Krivorian who had walked directly into a flash-blast tripwire and was now shaking violently, not from injury, but from simulated trauma. Idiran knew the soldier would recover in minutes. It wasn't the body that was failing, it was the mind. "Report," he barked. Perek stepped closer, his mandibles drawn tight. 12 more disabled, 3 in evacuation stasis, entire D-Scepter is blacked out, energy feed rerouted, internal map corrupted. 2 squads have requested extraction. Oh, Perek hesitated. "Sir." "No extraction," Idrin snapped. "We hold. Until we break them, or until someone ends the simulation from above." His voice was steady, but his vision was blurring from fatigue. The heads-up display inside his helmet had dimmed twice in the past 10 minutes. He no longer trusted it. He had seen one too many false signals, one too many voices crackle through the comm system and offer surrender, only to turn out to be fragments of manipulated audio. The humans hadn't just disappeared. They had turned the entire simulation into their weapon. He turned back toward the skyline. Shadows flickered in the distance. A child's voice hummed a tune from a shattered toy vending machine. He aimed and fired at it instinctively. The noise died. Static replaced it. Something was breaking, not just in the soldiers, in the simulation itself. The environment AI was glitching, as if unable to determine the proper narrative thread. This wasn't how drills went. This wasn't how cadets acted. The system had been built to simulate war, but not human improvisation. Inside a severed transit tunnel, Tala knelt beside a small portable emitter and rewired its feedback loop. Her palms were slick with sweat, her jaw set with focus. Beside her, Eli leaned against the wall, his rifle hanging at his side. His eyes were glazed not with fatigue, but with calculation. He was measuring the final push. "They're not retreating," she said. He nodded. "They're waiting for collapse." She glanced at him. "Theirs or ours?" "Both." He finished typing a sequence into a secondary uplink. It sent out an irregular pulse, barely detectable to standard comms, but obvious to anyone with adjusted sensory input. Far away, Jason received the ping and began Phase 3. His role was simple now: confusion through contact. He walked straight into a squad guarding the inner perimeter. He was unarmed. No gear, no helmet, no protective field. Just a human cadet walking through the haze. Shirt soaked, dirt on his face, a blank expression in his eyes. The alien soldiers aimed at him instantly. "Freeze!" shouted the leader, a Telvaxian corporal with jagged bone plates on his shoulders. Jason didn't stop. He walked forward. The corporal raised his rifle. Jason raised one hand and saluted. Then he dropped to his knees and laughed. Not a chuckle, not a cry for help. A deep, open laugh from someone who had just seen something he couldn't explain. The aliens looked at each other. The corporal lowered his rifle first. "What is wrong with you?" Jason looked up. His voice cracked through the tension. "I figured it out." "What?" "Nothing. That's what's wrong. Nothing about this makes sense anymore." Before anyone could respond, a cascade of noise filled the air. Speakers hidden in the rubble burst to life, playing a scrambled mix of alien anthem fragments and distorted human lullabies. All around the city, the lines collapsed. Some alien squads threw down their weapons in confusion. Others turned on each other in a storm of misread signals. A unit in the north perimeter accidentally engaged one of its own support teams after misidentifying their movement patterns. One Suvati lieutenant ran screaming from a collapsed hotel simulation, convinced that the humans had placed psychological parasites in the code. Captain Idrin slammed both fists into the wall beside him. "That's it, we stop this." He activated his master override key. Nothing happened. He entered it again. Still nothing. He looked to Perok. "Try yours," Taro complied. He waited. He stared at the blinking console. "No response," he said quietly. Idrin stepped back. Something surged in his chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. They had lost. This wasn't a failure of combat. It wasn't a collapse of protocol. It was the slow, methodical unraveling of the idea that rules could contain certain species. He turned to his squad, those who still stood. Many were huddled behind cover, unsure if what they were seeing was a trick, a dream, or the product of a corrupted feed. Several wouldn't move without direct orders. He lowered his helmet. He lifted both hands. "I'm issuing a formal surrender," he said aloud, voice projected to all frequencies. No one answered at first. Then came Eli's voice. Calm, almost gentle. "Accepted." For the first time in his career, Idrin fell to one knee, not from injury, but from relief. The war, fake as it was, had ended, and he knew, deep in his bones, that the surrender had been earned, not by firepower, by imagination. The simulation dome fell into an eerie silence. No alarms, no boots stomping, no comms buzzing with tactical updates, just the sound of wind generated by artificial ventilation and the quiet breathing of those who remained conscious. Captain Idrin stood still with his hands raised, his knees pressing into the fractured simulation ground, his eyes closed as if bracing for a blow that never came. The environment shimmered, not because the simulation ended, but because it recalibrated. From above, the monitors finally flickered with administrator override. A deep, resonant tone filled the air, and the world around the cadets began dissolving into pixelated light. The cracked roads faded first, followed by the broken rooftops and darkened streetlights. Everything collapsed upward, absorbed by the system in elegant layers of code, leaving behind a clean, featureless platform where only those who had participated still remained. Raljac's voice echoed through the speakers. Simulation terminated, outcome recorded. All units, stand down. A wave of blue light passed through the field, confirming that combat parameters had ceased. The alien soldiers lowered their weapons one by one. Some stared blankly. Others still clutched rifles, unsure if it was truly over. Idrin stood slowly. His muscles ached. His uniform was coated in sweat and grime, but none of it was real. Yet every part of him felt real. He turned around as the human cadets walked across the empty platform. No grand entrance, no smug grins, just tired, alert eyes and subtle nods exchanged between teammates. Eli approached first, his pace unhurried. His gaze met Idrin's. Neither spoke immediately. Then Idrin broke the silence. "You violated protocol." Eli nodded. "We worked within its boundaries, just not the spirit of it." "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Eli shrugged. "We didn't fight, we disrupted. There's a difference." Idrin inhaled sharply. "And what would have happened if this had been real?" Eli's response came without hesitation. "Then we'd be even more creative." Raljak descended from the observation deck, his expression unreadable. He surveyed the scene, the alien cadets recovering, the simulation team frozen in confusion, and 6 humans standing quietly in the middle of it all. He walked until he stood between the two groups. "This drill was meant to teach you interspecies cohesion," he said. "It was designed to measure discipline, structure, and command hierarchy." He turned to the alien soldiers. "And yet this outcome proves that cohesion is meaningless if the foundation is brittle." He gestured toward Eli. "What these cadets demonstrated is not chaos, it is adaptation. They studied your playbook and refused to play." One of the alien captains stepped forward. He looked older, seasoned. His face bore no arrogance, only curiosity. "Why didn't you follow the strategy briefing?" Taylor answered before Eli could. "Because the strategy was built to create a story. We weren't here for that story. We were here to survive." Jason stepped beside her. "We didn't improvise because we like to. We improvised because that's what Earth taught us. You call us Death Worlders, but what does that even mean if you never give us a reason to live in your systems?" Ralzak looked up at the massive display above. The final analysis of the simulation scrolled past. Alien forces surrendered. Simulation time, 67 minutes. Human tactical disruption score, 94%. Violation count, 0. No rules had been broken. No actions outside the permitted parameters, but everything had been changed. Idrin exhaled slowly and approached Eli again. "Next time we train together, I'm bringing backup AI." Eli gave him a tired smile. "Next time, we'll corrupt it faster." The tension broke, not with a laugh, but with a strange and solemn acceptance that passed through the alien ranks. No resentment, just understanding. Later that evening, the debriefing hall filled with high-ranking officials and academy staff. The human cadets were instructed to remain seated near the rear, except for the observers in what was supposed to be a post-simulation analysis. But when the time came to present findings, the instructors didn't start with statistics. They started with questions. How did you reroute the energy nodes without breaching core code? How did you predict the attacking unit's movements before deployment? How did you manipulate the simulation's AI behavior without triggering anomalies? Each time, a human answered, not boastfully, but clearly, analytically. They didn't claim superiority, they simply explained their reasoning. Simulations weren't real, but minds were. And the mind of a human, born on a world where nature punished every weakness, was trained for unfiltered reality. By the end of the session, the Academy's lead analyst, a Telvaxian female named Anvira, closed her tablet and looked out over the crowd. "We have been fighting wars by tradition," she said quietly, "but humans bring something we've forgotten. Flexibility through uncertainty." She paused. "We don't know what they'll do next. And that's exactly why we need them." The cadets were dismissed shortly after. Outside the hall, Eli stood beside Tala under the artificial twilight. The simulated stars shimmered above them. She was quiet, watching the lights ripple overhead. He handed her a bottle of rehydration serum. "You okay?" he asked. She took a sip. "Tired, but yeah." Jason joined them, dragging his feet slightly. "We're going to be unpopular after this," Eli chuckled. "Good, unpopular means remembered." Tala looked at both of them. "Do you think this changes anything?" Eli's gaze drifted toward the academy towers. "Not everything. But now, they'll stop looking at us like question marks." She smiled faintly. "Maybe." As the others joined them, Diana, Marcus, and Luis, they stood together without speaking. They had won nothing tangible. No medals, no celebration, just the knowledge that, for once, they had forced an entire intergalactic system to pause and think differently. Not bad for 6 Earth cadets. In the distance, the simulated moon lifted into the sky. It wasn't real, but the future suddenly felt closer than ever.